Hi, everybody. So you probably had a long day at this point, and you've been hearing a lot about financial transactions and how Zoho makes it easier for you, right? We have an amazing platform. It's been around for 15 odd years from what I gather and what you've all been using. So there is another part to financial transactions that a lot of people want to avoid, and that is paperwork. And I'm here to basically tell you how you can do that in a simple, seamless, and compliant manner. More emphasis on the compliance part of it because we feel like now laws are catching up, and we feel it needs to be given the amount of importance that it deserves. So I'm here to talk to you today about how you can take a trust and compliance first approach to business agreements and contracts, which are typically associated with your transactions with all the operations that undergo when you run a business. Right? So I just want a quick show of hands. I'm going to have something that's coming up on the screen. And since this is Bengaluru, I feel like it'll hit a little close to home. How many of you here recognize this man? It's a dead given on. Okay, I see a very, like 4 or 5 people raising. Nobody knows who this person is? Okay, more hands are going up. All right, who is this person? Does anybody know? Can Nitin Kamath. Okay. Now, there's a reason why I mentioned this. Is because if you had, okay, another question. How many of you here were here for Zoholics last year? Okay, now you kind of draw the dots on why I put this person's picture up. It's because Nitin was here last year, and he happened to sit down with our CEO in a fireside chat, and he discussed at length about how his company, Zerodha, was built from the ground up, and what they've been doing, and how there are similarities between Zoho and Zerodha in a lot of things. And he recently tweeted something, which is one of the similarities in terms of the problems we are attempting to solve. And that is, he spoke about how Zerodha at the start, or rather about a decade or so ago, were one of the smaller distributor and brokerage firms in the country, and they had about 5 lakh customers and had an employee count of 900. And how over the 10 years, and especially over the pandemic, the number of demat accounts in India surged, the number of customers we have who are investors and who participate in stock market trading and security trading and so on, went all the way up to about 1.3 crores, especially in Zerodha. But despite that number surging by about 25 times, the number of employees at Zerodha grew by just 200, right? And he spoke at length about how that was enabled primarily by the digitization of all the paperwork that came with the creation of demat accounts and all the paperwork that are associated with the financial transactions and so on. And that is the problem that we are also attempting to solve here at Zoho. And we are in our journey of trying to increase our employee count, not by as much, and follow the same path as Zerodha, while trying to keep up and enable our customers to grow at astronomical levels. So with that, let me just introduce you to the session. I will be talking about 2 products primarily from Zoho. One is a product, is an app or a service. The other one is a platform, and how that helps you get all your business paperwork and everything associated that goes on paper in order, but without the paper. So I'll talk about how agreements are done, how Zoho can help you get your agreements done, and how contextually it works across the ecosystem, and where trust and compliance comes into that. So the world runs on agreements, right? We all establish connections with people. We all establish certain terms in which we interact, engage, and basically build our relationships and take them forward. And at the very bottom of that, at least for businesses, is agreements. And these agreements are often driven by paperwork, some large amounts of paperwork. And we as humans tend to sort of follow this process of inking on these paperwork, that is, laying out our signatures on paperwork to have it be executed, right? And the process we follow for carrying out paperwork has not changed at all. It has a lot of steps in the process. Like, for example, you have to draft the agreements, you have to collaborate with the various stakeholders, you have to get it internally approved, you have to sort of send it across if they aren't within the same roof, and collect signatures. And if it's a financial transaction, you also have to collect payments if it involves some sort of regulatory payment like a stamp duty or something of that sort, that needs to be done. And eventually you get all of that paperwork compiled, collected, and stored in some place safe for you to retrieve for reference and for auditing, accounting, and so on. And this process is, like I said, has not changed at all. But in the last few years, the approach to this process has changed. And that is primarily driven by the fact that we underwent a pandemic of global magnitude, and that brought a lot of businesses to a halt in the way they operated because as humans, we tend to do business in person. But suddenly we had to adopt an online medium, do things digitally. The digital transformation had already been in progress, but the pandemic kind of made that happen a lot quicker. And there are some key elements to this approach change that we need to make note of, and as a result, factor that into how we are enabling businesses to do paperwork. And one of that is that businesses are done remotely now. They work remotely, and a lot of the conversations and the communication happens online. It no longer remains over phone or over face-to-face mediums. And workspaces tend to be hybrid, meaning employees of a business may not necessarily be sitting together while they're executing the operations. They can be at the comfort of their homes, they can be within their office spaces, but all of it put together makes it a process that needs a lot more collaboration across spaces, across walls, and it needs to be eased in a manner that it accommodates everybody's preferences. And experiences are digital first. Everybody has their phones, their laptops, their devices, tablets, smartwatches, everything, which enables them to access all of the information, both across their professional lives and personal lives, through these gadgets. And we have to ensure that the solutions that we offer are compatible with these gadgets, are enabling them to actually use these gadgets to derive the maximum value or the investments that they made in these gadgets. And finally, the transactions that are being executed have this major consideration of being cross-border. So there are laws to take into consideration, there are regulatory landscapes to take into consideration, and there is also the whole cultural aspect of it, whether something is culturally appropriate for us to be executing in the way that we're doing it, and so on. But despite all of those considerations, right, one thing we notice is that it might make things easier, but it does not necessarily reduce the amount of paperwork that still exists. In fact, the paperwork is only going to increase because how we have been operating for years on. And in a business particularly, you have paperwork in all functions, not particularly just finance, but also HR, onboarding, operations, marketing, sales, and so on. And you can see on your screen that you can find some form of paper that requires somebody to sign across all operations. And typically what happens here is that it tends to wear people out. It will cause them to lose interest in what they're doing because it's fairly cumbersome and repetitive, and they will feel very burnt out, and this can lead to mistakes and so on. There's a joke here. I'm not sure how many of you will get it, but how many of you here have seen Marvel movies? Okay. So this is our imagination of what Thanos would be like if he was a frustrated office worker because he has paperwork everywhere. And what we assume Thanos would be doing in that situation is that he wants to set the world into order, right? So he snaps and he eliminates half the population. But our Thanos says, run from it, dread it, but paperwork still arrives and snaps himself out of existence because he does not want anything to do with paperwork. That's our assumption. So we want to make it easier for Thanos and not want everything to be falling out of order. And the reason why somebody would feel this way when they would deal with a lot of paperwork is that paperwork in itself has a lot of challenges and questions. Regardless of the approach, the steps involved has several considerations that you need to make. And some of these considerations are not going to go away no matter what solution you bring. So we have to try and accommodate for this in the solutions that we have. So doing business across time zones is one of the primary concerns that we have in a world that is increasingly becoming smaller. And world can become smaller in terms of connectivity, but the Earth's diameter isn't changing, the arbitrary paths aren't changing, so time zones are going to exist, right? So we need to be in sync as far as time zones are concerned. And like I said, this is very repetitive, very cumbersome when you do paperwork. And as a result, the margin for error is always going to be there. So we have to try and automate that process leave it to some fail-safe mechanism so that errors don't occur. And as humans, we've always worked on the principles of security and trust, and when we are doing business in person, we have that comfort or air of security and trust about us because we're able to see what's happening. But when we do it online, that is quite not present, right? So we don't quite feel safe when we are transacting online, and that is why we always want things like OTPs, we want something like video verification, and so on. So there are concerns over trust and security when it comes to documents and transactions and signatures. And of course, there are also other concerns these days, especially after a lot of breaches or misuse of data and so on, that have slowly caught up in terms of regulation and in terms of just overarching concerns of the use of internet, such as privacy and non-compliance. Now, all of these factors, when you put them together, what happens is the business deals that you're executing online, especially with paperwork, they present a very low confidence, in the sense that you aren't quite confident in the ability to get a deal done despite the paperwork still being signed online, and you need to tackle that head-on with a solution that offers you that comfort or that security and compliance and so on. So the answer is fairly obvious, but what if I told you Zoho can fix all of that? Any Morpheus fans here? Okay, a few people have seen The Matrix, but a lot of people haven't. But several years down the line, people of the next generation will understand this meme. I hope that message gets delivered. Right? So with Zoho Sign, you can actually solve all the problems or the challenges that I just listed. And that is because this is an app that enables you to sign documents entirely online, manage your documents end-to-end, templatize the way you go about agreements and documents, enhance your productivity through preset workflows. And while doing all of this, you have your compliance mechanisms in place, you have your data security in place, you have all your legal backing, that is your audit trails and reports in place for you to bring that up whenever it is required. Now, I'm going to run through a bunch of product screens for those who are not familiar with the product. It's a product that is very simple to use, perhaps too simple to use for some people, but that is the idea here. We want to make it as easy and usable for you as possible. So how it works is you upload a document onto Zoho Sign, and you build out a workflow where you can determine who the recipients are, you can determine a signing hierarchy, the order in which people sign, the order in which they participate in the process, whether they just sign, whether they approve, or whether they host it for somebody else to sign physically, and so on. There are many options that are available for you to determine how this process takes place. And once you set the workflow in place, you can determine how you want to authenticate the signers, whether you want them to enter an OTP to access the document, whether you want them to use their Aadhaar, whether you want them to attach a piece of document, something of that sort, so that you have your measures in place to ensure the process is within your control of how you trust the person that is signing. And you can also set other parameters associated with these documents, such as how long they're valid for, by when should you have them renewed, and so on, and categorize them within Zoho Sign or across the Zoho ecosystem for you to reference or have them be attached to different processes, so that eventually you can come back and put it into context for you to act on the deal further. And eventually, when you get to the document itself, once you've set up the workflow, all you have here is the document where you have to drag and drop the fields of information for each of the signers. And with that, you can send it out, and you can track the documents in real time. So it's very simple. It's just these 6 screens that you're going to see over and over again as you execute documents. And you don't have to see these 6 screens over and over again. You can automate the process. That is the idea. And it helps you get your paperwork done in a jiffy. It's as simple as that. And this is something that is available across all popular platforms. That is something that is, I feel like, universal at this point. As far as Zoho is concerned, most of the applications are available across all platforms. One thing about Sign is that you can get your paperwork done in synchronization across these platforms, meaning you can start something on your laptop through your browser or through your desktop app. And if you have to keep going, you have to attend a meeting, something, on the go, you can just drop the laptop and pick up what you had initiated on your laptop with your phone and get the thing completed. And this applies not just to the app itself, but also to the integrations across the ecosystem. Right? We are perhaps one of the most deeply integrated applications across the Zoho ecosystem, with you being able to initiate documents for signing from all the popular applications across departments and functions. And this is not something that we restrict to Zoho alone. Rather, we also make it available on other platforms, or we just give you the APIs which you can use if you have a team that can implement an integration in-house with your websites and applications. I just want to, again, run you through some screens on how this is already implemented in Zoho, if you're not aware. So this is Zoho Writer. One thing Zoho Sign does not have by itself is the ability to compose documents, and we didn't build it because we've had a solution for that for ages. We've had Zoho Writer, which is arguably the most comprehensive word processor software that is cloud-based, and we just decided to build Sign separately and integrate it into Writer. And this is what it looks like. When you have a document that you've prepared, you can use the Automate tab to bring in Zoho Sign, add fields, and send it out for signature. And similarly, we can do the same thing across other applications. So here's CRM. We have an extension that you can install, and automatically you have a button that appears in about 8 odd modules, which if you click, it brings up the workflow builder that I showed you earlier inside Zoho Sign, except the magic here is that you don't have to go to Zoho Sign. You can do it from CRM and have the documents be sent from CRM in a contextual manner, and have that be signed, track it from within CRM, and get it stored back into CRM, associated and attached to the record that you have. And if you're somebody who's from a different function, not sales or not from legal or not from a department that works on these documents, you're just a support agent or you're just somebody who checks your mails on a daily basis, you still have something that can help you get your document signed. We have extensions built for each of the Zoho apps, such as the ones that you see here, which brings up what you see inside the Zoho Sign app, inside each of these apps from the side panels or from the extensions that we support, that allows you to get these documents signed and brings it back into that very same app in a contextual manner. So there's always some way or the other that you have interoperable access to Zoho Sign to get documents signed. Here's Zoho Recruit as well. I know a lot of people work for staffing agencies, send out documents to sign to candidates and potential applicants. And this can also be achieved from the extensions that we have. And here's Zoho People, because when you have an employee that is being onboarded that has to sign documents, then as and when they become the employee, they have a life cycle where they will be signing more documents right up until their exit. And you need to have a process that is just as well integrated with the other apps that you use to manage their life cycle to be able to send this document out, track it in real time, and so on. Now, let's say you're not a business who does all of this. You just have a website where you have something very basic to sign. You can just use Zoho Forms to create a form, have a document be on the back end. You can integrate that with the form and trigger a workflow for signatures from that as well. So it presents you with a plethora of use cases that fit into different functions that you have. And it's all a matter of you having to figure out where do you need something to sign and how do you integrate it with the rest of the Zoho apps that you're using. So now that we've taken a look at these solutions that Zoho has, if we revisit these questions, you can say that you can kind of check off the first two challenges that you have here. That is doing business across time zones, because we provide you with the solutions to stay synchronized and do things online. And the cumbersomeness or the repetitiveness of things, because we are giving you a fair amount of customization and automation. But trust, security, compliance, and confidence is still going to be a question for you. And for that, we have the aspects of Zoho Sign that a lot of people tend to have questions over. For one, Zoho Sign is something that was built with compliance for laws across the world, and there are different levels of signature that were defined by these laws across regions. Though these definitions may vary, there is a significant amount of overlap, and the underlying technology itself is the same. And we built the app on these principles, and by extension, we are compliant. And we don't just say that, we actually have the legal backing to say that. For example, in India at least, Zoho Sign has been launched and listed in the GEM portal for people who are working with public-facing companies or on government projects where they can establish documents to be signed. And what we're doing now is we are taking a more compliance-first approach in developing the app ourselves rather than relying on you to use it in a discretionary manner. We are providing integrations with trust services such as Aadhaar, eSign, eMudra, for that matter, wherein you can adopt these third-party services and bring it into Zoho and use that to establish your own trust in the deals that take place. We have identity-based verification for accessing documents. We have identity-based signatures. we have document timestamping, and now, very recently, we launched even stamp duty payment. So these are integrations that you can access inside Zoho Sign through the integrations tab. You can play around, configure, enable them, and just see how they work out. First thing I want to talk about here, especially, is in India, a lot of companies are not just B2B, but B2C, and we are an economy of about 1.4 billion people. Now, Aadhaar has become like the primary bedrock of our identity. So every service wants to use Aadhaar for KYC, authentication, and so on. And that was at the very top of our list when we started to build compliance-related integrations. So what Zoho Sign offers you now is the ability to authenticate your signers through Aadhaar. That way, you have a certificate in each document that says, hey, this person is in fact this person, and there's no way they can deny that it was forged or something like that. And we have certain legacy technologies that are still in place, such as PFX files and USB tokens. I'm sure a lot of you here use the USB-based signing methods for signing invoices, GST filing, and so on. We have support for that in Sign as well. We don't want to necessarily move to the cloud and then forget and leave the legacy technology behind, but rather build backwards compatibility for you to be able to do everything the way you have it, and then make the switch as and when you're comfortable. The transition has to be eased rather than forced, that's our philosophy, basically. And we also have this technology called timestamps, which is not as prevalent in India, but we feel like regulation is soon going to be enforcing this, wherein if you use digital certificates to sign documents, at some point they will expire, but the document validity may outlast the digital certificate itself. So what we did was we identified vendors who provide trusted timestamps accredited by the Indian CCA, and we apply them to documents so that the signatures are preserved well into the future, rather than leaving it to you to kind of scramble at the time of the signature expiry to find out if the document is still valid or not. And of course, something else that I spoke about earlier was the ability to pay stamp duty. How many of you here have had to scramble to buy stamp paper when you had to get something executed? Yeah, that's a real struggle. As a person that doesn't even run a business, I've had to scramble because I had to get my rental agreement renewed. That is no longer the case. We have e-stamping, which not a lot of people seem to be aware of because it is still quietly creeping into our legal framework, but it is there. And we want to be the first to have that be available in the market in terms of a SaaS platform. So what we did was we went and integrated with a e-stamp vendor, which allows you to integrate and pay stamp duty across 6 states that currently support e-stamping, and make the payments and have the document be just as legally equivalent to a printed stamp paper that you would purchase from a notary or from a vendor. Now, these are all typically features that you would be fairly comfortable once you see them, but there is one aspect of transactions which will never let you rest, and that is payment. Unless you can sign all the documents you want, but unless you see some form of payment, some of us can never sleep, right? And we wanted to solve that as well. So what we did was we integrated with Zoho Checkout, which I'm pretty sure you all heard about earlier, and allowed you to integrate that in Sign and make that a part of the signing process. So there's a payment field that you can add to documents now, and you can have a payment page set up in Checkout, which will collect the payment at the time of the signatures, and unless the payment is made, the document is not considered legally valid or digitally signed. And this offers a lot more security, we feel, and it really sort of panders to the human sentiments that drive the way we establish trust and confidence in the things that we do. Or there are people who also want additional things. For example, when we go through immigration, right? Immigration captures our biometrics, so there is undeniable proof that we went through immigration, but they still take a picture of our face. Why is that so? That is just on paper, they need to have some form of proof that this person has gone through immigration, despite the biometrics being there, and that is unforgeable. So that sort of additional layers of human comfort measures need to be present, typically, in the things that we do, and that is what we did in Sign as well, wherein we ask you to have your signers attach stamps or an image which supports a selfie. Imagine having a document, having somebody's signature, but there's also a selfie of the person in the document. That way you can well and truly say that, hey, okay, it is in fact them, it's not somebody else. So we have these measures which may seem a little silly, but trust me, they provide a lot more comfort and confidence in getting deals done. And of course, the underlying technology is digital signatures. It's not just something that you can see. and not really verify. So they are certificates that will carry a link to your identity, and if the documents are tampered with, you will be able to ascertain that it has been tampered with. And you have a certificate of completion for the trail of signatures, for the trail of communication and the liaising that took place. And this can be produced if there is a dispute, and given that we already comply with all the laws, courts can never quite rule against you because we provided all the supplementary information that is required. And these are some things that I don't really want to call out very explicitly, but you get this as a part of signing up with Zoho, that is platform-related security. You get encryption at rest, so nobody is able to intercept your data and get it in a format that they can make sense out of. You have automated backup for redundancy measures, and you must have seen our compliance backing. Like, we have a lot of certifications, and we are working on supporting more certifications. And we recently had the PDP Act, DPDP Act, I'm sorry, and we are building compliance towards that as well, so that we want to be just as compliant in India as we are, say, in the EU for the GDPR and so on. And finally, when you talk about just your employees and within an office space, how your documents are secure to prevent any unauthorized access and so on, we always encourage that you use our built-in SSO and MFA solutions, which can protect your documents inherently with their own Zoho credentials. That way, you have the audit trail to also establish that they access the documents, so you can always spot irregularities and unauthorized access. Now, with all of this stuff that I've just presented, sort of coming presented to you and you starting to use it, it now maybe starts to make a little more sense that that we do really have you covered in terms of trust and security, privacy and compliance, and also put together presents you with a lot more confidence in the business deals. So that's kind of what I have in store for you in terms of Zoho Sign. However, this is not really quite enough sometimes. So I want to take 2 minutes to show you something else that we're building as a platform to begin with that can help you do a little better in terms of paperwork. Now, I'm going to start skipping slides here because I'm running out of time. But I really don't want to, I don't want to take up more of your time because I understand some of you want to get back into the city. So I just wanted to think about how obligations and contracts matter, because your execution does not end with just signing a document. There is a lot more in a customer lifecycle. There is a lot more in a business lifecycle. So there needs to be more context. There needs to be more risk aversion, obligation management, and so on. And for all of that, we need to take a relook at how we do the typical contract lifecycle. And this, again, follows the same process as getting signatures on a document. There are multiple steps that are fairly repetitive and cumbersome, and this needs perhaps a little more attention because it has an impact on your bottom line. And for us to help you streamline this, we kind of looked at the various problems it presents, such as being able to negotiate or mitigate long contract life cycles, mitigate the costs that come with it, and also not miss out on opportunities as a result of the time the process takes or the risks that are associated with it, and also have the access to all the critical information that help you not just have this information be within your paperwork, but also within some system that can be actioned upon. So what we did was we introduced a platform that was built on top of Zoho Sign and our built-in word processor writer, and that is Zoho Contracts. And our aim is to have it evolve into a growth engine for your business by serving as an end-to-end contract management platform. Now, Contracts, I'm going to quickly give you a preview, has a very clear, comprehensive dashboard on how many documents you have, or how many active contracts you have, how long they're valid for, what's in the pipeline, and so on. And it also has the ability for you to configure templates. And it doesn't just quite end with templates. Rather, it has its own clause library. You can import clauses, create clauses, and this varies with the region and compliances. And you can then create the different templates which you can execute through the same form of collaboration that you have available within Zoho Sign, with extensive authoring, extensive redlining capabilities, and so on. And you can then set up workflows for approvals, signatures, and further negotiation and obligation management. Now, the signing part of it is obviously taken care of by Zoho Sign, which I spoke about at length. But something that Zoho Sign does not help you with is the ability to kind of understand what contract demands what kind of attention, what obligations are there, what risks are there. And that is where contracts really comes into the picture, because as a platform, it serves you all those insightful information and analytical reporting, which you would require to be on top of your deals after it is executed. So you have an obligation management module where you can understand and extract what obligations come with each contract and what action needs to be taken at what time for you to sustain that contract or renew that contract. And you have the reporting and the audit system in place, which allows your users to kind of understand what is happening at a bird's view level of how many contracts are being executed, what recurring obligations you have, and what customers have what obligations in place that you would need more attention to spend on and so on. And finally, we also have an integration with Zoho CRM, which at this point in time is fairly nascent, but is being built upon further, which helps you kind of connect the three applications, Sign, CRM, and contracts at the same time, and have all your paperwork stored within the CRM application itself. So sort of imagine like a platform within a platform. And yeah, you can see the evolution and the inception that takes with that. So as I said earlier, our idea is for you to have these tools at your disposal and offer pain relief to all your people that work with paperwork. And at the end of the day, as your company scales and as you increase your customer count, you will be able to sort of transform this into a growth engine for your business. And rather than look for more tools, or rather than look for more people to hire, and how you can sort of navigate this without having to expend more resources. So if put together and used rightly, Zoho Sign and Zoho Contracts can help you streamline your entire contract lifecycle, help you mitigate all your business risks, and also have your governance improve because of the auditing system in place and the ability to draw insights, and promote a lot more collaboration in a more eased-out manner online. So I'll leave you with this one stat. This is a stat I like to take a look at over and over again. Imagine the paperwork you do today, and you are already exhausted. But in about 8 years' time, 7 years' time, it's going to increase by the same amount. It's going to increase by 8 times. And our vision at Zoho is for you to have that experience be powered by Zoho Sign and Zoho Contracts. So yeah, with that, my presentation is done.
Yes,
I'm happy to take questions.